Hi, everyone, and Happy New Year. Happy 2026. It's me, Jon Oltsik, research analyst, researcher, or analyst in residence at theCUBE Research. And I'm here for another episode of the Cybersecurity Bridge podcast. If you are one of the few people in the world who have not seen the Cybersecurity Bridge podcast, first of all, what are you doing? This is good stuff. But second of all, each episode is broken into three sections. In the first section, we talk about the present of a security technology or service. In the second section, we talk about the future of that service or technology. And in the third section, it's the cybersecurity bridge. How do we get from here to there? And I'm happy to have as my first guest in 2026, Nicole Jiang, who is the CEO of Fable Security. Welcome, Nicole, and please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, John. First of all, thank you for the warm welcome. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Nicole. I'm the co-founder CEO of Fable Security, and we're building a platform that is a human risk management platform, helping enterprises understand risky behavior within their employees, but also deploy interventions to help employees build cyber resilience, know what to look for, and reduce the chances of human errors that causes social engineering and cybersecurity attacks.
Great. Well, it's great to have you as a guest. I appreciate that. And before we begin, are you ready to play cybersecurity trivia?
Sure, let's do it. So what you got?
Okay, so I have to read this because I did massive amounts of research here. But it's a basic question. How much did organizations spend on security awareness training in 2025 based on different research that's out there? Was it between $1 billion and $3 billion? Was it between $3 billion and $5 billion? Was it between $5 billion and $7 billion? Or was it between $7 billion and $9 billion?
Wow, that is a great question. I would love to learn the answers, but I feel like people spend quite a bit of money. So I think it's probably option 3 or option 4. Different companies also allocate security awareness budgets very differently too. They can do a lot within. So I'm curious to hear, John, what is the answer?
Well, you didn't give me an answer. Which one is it, 3 or 4?
I think it's going to be 3.
Oh, look at you. We start 2026 on a positive note. It is between $5 and $7 billion. And that was sort of an amalgamation of Mordor Intelligence and 360i research data. So everyone's got their own research methodology. This isn't my research. This is my number, but that's what I found. So you are spot on. Good job. So let me start with a question. So I found a good definition for human risk management, and it is the identification, measurement, and mitigation of risks caused by human behavior. So can you expand upon that? Can you talk about what risks are we identifying, what risks are we measuring, and how are we mitigating those risks with HRM?
Absolutely. So, at Fable, we embarked on the journey to really understand employee behavior by first understanding data and also understanding the threat landscape. So when we look at the human risk, what does human behavior mean? What does human errors mean? There's actually 3 different pieces to it. I think the first piece everyone sort of knows. I came from the world of email security. I've seen a lot of phishing emails. I've seen a lot of different threat vectors that target people. This is really about the tendency, the propensity of people falling for something that seems so real, so relevant. Someone pretends to be a loved one, someone you work with, soliciting for information. So that's one piece of human behavior. Are you prone to falling for something? Do you trust people around you, and do you take actions that doesn't, ultimately are the correct actions? You got tricked and social engineered. The second piece is really about security hygiene. So depending on how we grow up, depending on where we work, depending on the amount of access you have, the roles, you get to have different security posture related to how you work. If you're in finance, you get access to payroll, money. If you're HR, you get access to certain information. Healthcare, you get IP about patient information. So there's human behavior around how you handle and how you support sensitive access data within. So that's that piece. And then the last piece is also about, where we work, how organizations create playbooks, create an environment to keep people safe? Do they give you MFA? Do they give you password manager? Do they give you certain tools to make sure that you're being secure and the organization is configured to keep you secure or give you a ways to configure to be secure? All these three factors eventually funnel into how we behave. And also, I would say different openings where attackers might come in and target to cause harm to someone personally or to their organization. But all those three things eventually funnel into when we talk about human errors, human behavior, and why the HRM system looks at those, identify areas of improvement, and then create mitigation, like you said.
I see. And that makes a lot of sense to me. And we'll dig into those specifically. But I had a guest last year who also came from a human risk management company. And so what's changed in the last year? Is it as the product advanced, do you see the market understanding the technology or accepting the technology more?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the way I look at it really comes from many different angles. And I think it's not just last year, but really the last few years where things have been rapidly changing. John, like I mentioned before, so I used to work at Abnormal Security, where my career in cyber started. And really back then, it was just about email phishing, social engineering. People were sending you emails, we fall for them, we open links, we download attachments, we all kind of know where that goes from here. But in 2023, 2024, and of course now 2025, we're seeing a lot of attack vectors expanding. So we're getting phone calls, text messages, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, like a lot of different channels in which a corporate security perimeter just don't cover. And as a result, we're seeing, the same kind of kill chain happens, but at the beginning, it becomes very diversified. And so to go back to your question the last year, we're seeing things like, North Korean fake employees becoming a much more rampant thing, starting just as a couple in 2024, but became very extreme in 2025. I hear, security practitioners talking about it. IT help desk being a really big one. In 2023, there was the MGM Resort breach, but really now it's more of a common practice. Like, how do we look for impersonations, deepfake, bad actors calling in because help desks have to help or pick up their phone calls as part of their jobs. So really, it's starting from the threat landscape and seeing how there's just so many more different ways that people are getting targeted. And not only is that happening, the methods are also evolving such that just by the time we understand one attack vector, we've already moved on to five more. And so that velocity of increase, I think, is really now challenging, or really, as builders, we have to think about how to stay on top of the bad actors game. If I could share one more thing, is also the development AI being very, very challenging, I would say both builders and practitioners and employees can do a lot of things with AI. You can do a lot of bad things with AI, unfortunately. And we're also seeing that, attackers are getting very smart. They're using tools to do research. They're using those tools to really accelerate the speed of these very diversified attacks that focuses on human and social manipulation.
Yes, and we will definitely touch on AI in this conversation, especially as we get to the future. But here's a question I probably should have started with, and there's a misconception that security awareness training and HRM are two different things. So can you just put that to bed and address that?
Sure. In my view, and I welcome views from everybody, and also you, John, is I think the industry started with security awareness training because I think, this is how we learn. Training is super important for us to learn how to do our jobs, how we got our education. And so security awareness training is really that catch-all way to touch base with, I think, our employees to make sure they know how to stay safe. They know the corporate procedures. It's a lot of awareness training, right? Annually, you get training, security testing through simulations, and that's what the category looks like. But over time, as we all do in the industry, HRM is really looking at specific behavior, data, risks to say, hey, look, blanket statements of training don't work for everyone because attackers don't just spray and pray. They used to, and now they're becoming a lot more targeted. And therefore, how we support our employees must be targeted and also reflect the threat landscape. And so there's this natural evolution where we started with security awareness training, and there are also compliance reasons to do it. But now organizations are really looking at the way they can support their employees by data modeling, understanding the threat landscape, and also plugging in way more effective mitigation methods and remediation methods for employees.
Yeah, and I'm just going to offer an opinion here based on my knowledge of the market and tell me what you think. I'm going to say
Okay.
60% of organizations still to this day treat security awareness training is a checkbox. I've got to do it because of HIPAA. I've got to do it because of GDPR. I've got to do it because of PCI. I do it and I can check the box. Another 20% say, well, that's not good enough. And maybe they do some synthetic phishing training. So they do a little bit of proactivity. And so that would leave an additional 20% of the market that actually look for things like HRM to improve their employees and their workers' knowledge, and to really do the things that we talked about: find the risk, measure the risk, mitigate the risk. Am I off base here?
I think you are not off base, but I would challenge what people do versus what they want. So I would say how people use tools today roughly maps to that. And I would say in organizations today, more and more of that, like middle 20%, John, you talked about, they're doing testing, simulation, red teaming. So I would actually say like the 60% number are doing awareness training simulations. There's probably a funky middle, like 20 to 30% who really want to go towards the HRM world. And I would say probably around like 10-15% are truly, I would say, best in class people who are really leveraging their data to protect their employee base. But if you ask people what they're hoping to do, like that 60% of folks that are doing security awareness training and simulations, they go like, no, 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 I know we need to do more. And they're asking, how do we do it? And the reason why they're asking now, especially in the last 2 years, is that they're seeing that threat landscape change. And therefore, as you know, security is a cat and mouse game. And so we're a little bit, I think we're quite behind, in fact, in the human layer. And so folks are looking for ways to level up. But the reality, as we know, is changes take time. And so, so if you ask the folks, what are the intention? What do you want to achieve? Where do you want to go? In fact, very few people say we want to stay in the world of SAT.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's I'm reminded, and I've quoted him before in my podcast, but Bruce Schneier was the one who said that people are the weakest link in the security chain. And when you say that, everyone nods their head. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's a high time we learn how to deal with that weakness. So let's move on to the future. I read a great book, and I recommend it to all my podcast listeners. It's called Co-Intelligence: Living and Working with AI by a University of Pennsylvania professor named Ethan Mollick. And basically what he says is, look, AI is here. It's going to change everything. And therefore, as an educator, we have to learn where we can use it positively and where we have to guard against it. But for education, we're talking about highly personalized education. So talk about personalizing education with HRM, and now you can weave in the AI piece.
Yeah, of course. I would love to read this book. Thank you for the recommendation. So here at Fable, the way we're seeing human risk is, the truth is like there's a lot of behavioral science. There's a lot of there's a lot of, I would say, frankly, common sense around how people learn habits and how people learn to grow. And security is a gnarly topic where, where a lot of us are just trying to do our job on a day-to-day basis. We're very lucky to be practitioners of security, so we think about it every day. But it's important to know that most folks are just trying to get on with their professions. But everyone wants to be safe. Everyone wants to understand what that looks like. And it's very difficult to learn how to do something when we don't know what that looks like. And so this is where I think security awareness and also human risk comes in a really clever way, where it's not about boiling the ocean and say, here are the 1,000 things you should know about how to stay safe. But it's really more about like, hey, there's 5 things that you got to do to keep yourself safe, your team safe, your company safe. We notice you're doing those, you're not doing those. Here's how it works, right? So really helping folks focus would actually create the most amount of upsides in terms of safety. And so the personalization really comes in by understanding what someone needs instead of boiling the ocean, which the capacity of that is really challenging, especially for a sophisticated topic. Now, where AI really kicks in is AI is really, really good at sifting a large quantity of data, understanding who we are, and create recommendations or create these really important top of mind items, especially when it comes to security hygiene, how to stay safe, and best of all, like really combine the context of a company in relevance to me. So if I'm working in a large corporation, there are very different rules of engagement to stay safe and stay secure. Me at a startup as a finance person instead of a CEO, very different rules of engagement. It's impossible for a security awareness or SOC director to understand what that means for individual employee. But AI is perfect for something like this. And so why not? We've all gone through education. We all know that teachers have a hard job teaching a lot of students to retain everything. Imagine having a private tutor, right, to be able to show you how things go. Less time, more upside. And I hope that most people have a good experience having private lessons, but I certainly have in terms of having, learning something a lot faster because I got that tailored experience. So now with AI software, we can do the same thing for security awareness.
Yes, and that's one of the points of the book that I mentioned is we're still teaching our children in their school, in public schools, in schools in general. We have one teacher, and in the best case, maybe 10 students or 14 students. In the worst case, a lot more than that. But we're teaching them all at the same, and we all learn differently. So if we can personalize education as you can with HRM, that makes sense. So to that extent, I have a bit of a geeky question. So if I want to attack Fable Security and I will want to target you, Nicole, I
Okay.
may try to find your personal computer. I may try to find your mobile devices. So is HRM, does that extend? So for instance, is there an AI agent that monitors my behavior across all my devices? Or is that where we're going with HRM?
It's a good question, John. And so I think a lot of vendors and practitioners think about, I would say, traditionally security, monitoring all the endpoints, monitor all the systems. But the reality is, attackers don't have those information, right? Like they understand someone's role, they understand news about the business, they understand everybody has a cell phone, right? And so they're looking for things like phone numbers, personal information, things that you consider urgent, important that you will react to. And so our approach here is instead of thinking about like, wow, we must be on every single device that someone has and a kind of, big brother over looking at them. We're really thinking about from a threat actor perspective, if, Nicole is the person in question and I became a target, what are some of the ways for me to start to engage with them? And so in the scenario, John, that you talked about, right? Like my LinkedIn is out there. You can see my company based in San Francisco. You can see my background. There are a lot of things that you can do to start to look at ways to target me. So here at Fable on the HRM side, we can also know the information if we put ourselves in the perspective of a threat actor and start to proactively say, "Hey, Nicole, chances are someone's going to send you a message about this. This is what it will likely look like. We're seeing thousands and millions of examples of what this could look like. Here's what you can do instead. Proactively flag them to your security team. And now they would know how to properly map out certain threats, especially if they're new and emerging that folks haven't seen before. I think earlier, John, you mentioned that people are the weakest link, but people are also the first ones to flag something when they look really off if they don't know what they looked like before. So teaching them this muscle can go actually quite a long way to get organizations to proactively deploy changes, mitigations, controls, especially when a new type of human social engineering threat happens.
Okay, I get it. I'm getting it. Slowly but surely, I'm getting it. So here's an even geekier question, though. So we're talking about HRM, H standing for human. And so you obviously want to monitor my behavior or human behavior in general. We're on the cusp of having thousands of agents. doing work
Mhm.
on behalf of humans. So does HRM eventually extend, or maybe in the near term extend, to agent risk management?
It's a really good question. This is where it comes from, those three buckets initially of the human behavior that we talked about. So far, we talked a lot about social engineering, where a bad actor would target a human, and we're tricking. They're looking for. Uh, they're looking to trick people to fall for something, right? By gaining their trust. The nice thing about agents is that's a bucket that doesn't quite make sense for them, because agents have clear instructions, clear automation tasks, and clear deliverables. But the other two piece, right, of how human behavior, human errors are structured, actually do apply to agents. If your agents are done, they're created incorrectly, they don't have certain edge cases, they don't know how to create outcomes based on, certain edge cases in which you have to execute. That is kind of the middle part with like, wow, this agent's handling a lot of sensitive actions, right? Do we know if it's the right action, wrong action that that creates outcome of a business that makes sense? And then the other part is also like, how much data? Like, what is the company? What are you looking to deploy the agents to do? Do they have the right perimeters and configurations to play? That's the third bucket where agents actually fit into that bucket as well. And so when we think about uh, uh, HRM, we're really looking at, given an entity, whether it's human or non-human, which bucket of risk does it create, and how do we mitigate things like that? So the framework actually, it doesn't quite matter if it's a real, hot flash human, or someone who's, achieving their tasks that might be a agent that doesn't have, thoughts, feelings, words, but they're still executing tasks that creates risk for a business. So our framework, I believe, fits within this world. And of course, in the day, John, one thing I didn't really talk about is, ultimately our goal is to protect our employees and reduce risks that are coming from this entity-based world. And if attackers are targeting here, we must do something about it.
Yes, and I think, I mean, the objective with agentic AI is that the agent is working on behalf of the human. So there'll be a kind of a symbiotic relationship moving forward. And so everything you said makes sense. So we're going to move on now to the cybersecurity bridge, how we get from here to there. And I'm going to ask you to put on your sales hat. So I'm a CISO, you are Nicole from Fable Security. And I say, okay, Nicole, I get it. I get theoretically, I get what you're saying about HRM. It makes a ton of sense to me. I get the future, and I even get the personalization of education. But I need to justify this to my board or to my executives. What are the metrics? How do I prove that HRM will be successful for me?
Absolutely. So for us, is really looking at, it's almost like a very clean visual. Today, there's a number of people in your organization that creates risk. Who are they? What do they look like? What do they do? Today, a lot of CISOs aren't able to answer that question. They may immediately know. They know that, hey, look, my IT help desk, of course, very risky today based on the scatter spider attacks. Of course, my finance team, very high risk, especially during, tax seasons, closing of quarters, fiscal year releases. Yes, my HR team, they're getting targeted with fake employees, but they don't know exactly what that looks like. Who are the really risky people? So the first thing that we create is to help our customers understand, like, here's what your risk profile looks like across your population. The assumption here being people, even though, as we say, are the weakest link, they're also our biggest assets in the company. And so to me, there's that inherent, these are important folks for us to keep close attention, to keep the business going. And then the second thing becomes, are we able to reduce these risks that people do that creates mostly unintentional effects, or gaps for the business? If Fable can deliver mitigations, whether it's personalized interventions, creating configuration, creating changes in the organization from a security posture, we should be able to look at that initial frame and say, look, there should be less people doing things that are unintentional, risky things to the company, right? Before, people used to share a lot of files, now they share less files that are considered sensitive. Before, there are PII violation, now there are less because now people know how to share their data. That's a really great sign. Before, people used to fall for a lot of phishing links, now someone has started to report. That's pretty great. So those are ways we can generate not just ROI around less bad behavior, but also like the company should be more productive and more efficient as an outcome of that. So that is the pieces where HRM can truly shine. But you can't really say, hey, I'm a 20,000 employee organization. I'm going to tell 20,000 employees to do the same thing over and over again. So that personalization piece is low time sink, but high ROI on the most critical matters. And that's how we justify business value over time as well and be our customers, you in this case, CISO, John's partner. And so if we can do that, we really elevate where the security awareness training piece is all the way to part of a operational system to deliver risk reduction, productivity gain. John, one thing I didn't mention is, people also love content. Like I don't know about you, like I look at Instagram, I look at TikTok, I watch news, I listen to podcasts. People love when the content's engaging and they learn something from it. And that's the reason why here at Fable, right? Fable means show stories, is we want to teach folks valuable lessons that actually make sense for them. That's really vital to how they work. And so when you see employees actually, thank you for teaching them something, keeping them safe, there's also some really amazing qualitative ways that, people feel that the organization is protecting them and giving them that extra coverage. So I think that's also a very important ROI that I like to share with practitioners when that might not be something top of mind when, coming from security and protecting typically the system, not the human.
Everything you said makes sense. Is there a killer metric? And just to be more clear, like tell me about a customer, a CISO who said, you know what, Nicole, I believed in this, I implemented it, but I didn't know it would do this. What is this?
Yeah, I have a really, I don't know if it fully answers your question, but I do have a really good example here that really articulates the value for Fable. So, one of our customers, they came from a particular sector where last year they were going through a lot of ransomware attacks across the entire industry. It's not a very sophisticated industry, but it's a critical.
Sounds like healthcare. Go ahead.
Sounds like a lot of sectors, unfortunately. But for this particular one, the security team was very worried about them being a victim of ransomware, and unfortunately their setup of the organization just isn't able to have a lot of budget devoted to security just based on the margin, to just how the companies run, the number of employees that they have to protect, a lot of employees. And so this is where the common denominator really came into. It was really just security awareness training and HRM. And so we were able to really rapidly create hyper-personalized, relevant custom content related to ransomware in their category. And we were able to walk through every single employee on how to look out for ransomware, recognize the indicators, knowing how their peers in the industry got attacked, and knowing what to look for. And so this company never got ransom during the entire last year. And that's the biggest win we were able to have for our company, is that their company's business is operational. They didn't have to think about cybersecurity outcomes that impact business metrics, that impacts organizational changes. And they were able to proactively flag a lot of things for this company that could have been the starting point to ransomware attacks. To me, that's the biggest way to say, hey, it's not about the single killer metric, but we were able to be the first line of defense at the employee layer, and the business never stopped running when a lot of their neighbors, right, got hit by attacks that were also frankly hit for this company, but they never, they were never impacted. Of course, we cannot take credit for everything that happens in an organization, but we're the first line of defense at the employee layer. If we can reduce the amount of noise that comes into the security operations center, we've done something really good for, I would say, the overall health of the business, the security team, but also people. Every single person in this company really knows what ransomware is and how to not do certain things, right, that lead them into this scenario.
Yeah, that's a pretty good killer metric. You're being very you're downplaying this a little bit, but if I'm the CISO and I say, look, everyone else in our industry or these major players got hit with ransomware and we didn't, that I can translate that into business and I can translate that into cost. So we're running low on time, but I do have one more question before we get to my end question that I ask everyone. And that is, it seems to me there's a third party involved in this. So there's me, the CISO, there's you at Fable, but there's also cyber insurance. So has cyber insurers, have the underwriters realized that HRM should be or could be beneficial toward their risk management profile?
I think this is a great question, John. And the reality is, I think a lot of things that security practitioners do can actually fit into the the cyber insurance world and be able to justify that ROI. I think this is something that we're actively looking at and working through to see, is there value. I know that a lot of folks today in the security practitioners world is thinking about, like, is it better to just pay for cyber insurance versus boosting our internal practices? And so one area we sure hope is that, look, if 80-90% of cybersecurity incidents involve a human error, there must be something we can do to, number one, reduce risk. And if we reduce risk, then it's a dollar equation into why cyber insurance can be lowered. So this is a huge area of focus. I think this is an area that over the next few years, we'll also see kind of changes in the rules and the engagement changes. I think as of right now, there's a lot, like you mentioned, John, I would say 60% of our industry right now is really looking at security awareness as SAT. I think until the market becomes a lot more mature, that will naturally, I feel like, make cyber insurance a much more also, like, um, I would say a mathematical, a more logical way to reduce versus today. I think it's still very much remaining quantitative. So hope that makes sense. But this is something that we're very interested in. I believe that I believe when we deliver value to customers and seeing these metrics, cyber insurance is a reflection of that risk being brought down. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And to answer that question, should I invest less in cybersecurity controls and more in cybersecurity insurance? No, don't do that. That's a stupid thing to do. You have to do both, but the goal is reducing risk for your organization, not transferring risk to insurance companies. So my final question that I ask everyone, give our audience your absolute, you must do this with regard to HRM, security awareness training. What's your advice?
My single biggest advice is we must understand our data. I say this because there's so much data today that we get for a company, whether it's security, whether it's about people, whether it's about our processes. By understanding those, it's the starting point to become very strategic. I've seen a ton of data coming from our customers, coming from our employees, coming from how they talk about awareness, how they talk about security. From there, I learned a great deal on people's desire to stay safe and people's desire to learn and know how to protect themselves. So I hope that organizations, especially security folks, looking at some of that data, not just when alerts happen, but some of the early indicators can go a really long way. I know it takes time. I know it takes focus, energy, but it's been an incredible learning for me to understand human sentiment, um, uh, behavioral patterns, and see ways that we can zero out risk.
Yes, I love that. Look at the data, because security awareness training, what data do we look at? Have we trained people? Yes or no? Have we trained everyone? No, we've only trained 75%. That's superficial. But if we look at individuals, how do people learn? Who are our dangerous users? How do we remediate that? How do we measure if we've remediated that? Sure, that there's a lot more there to make decisions with. So Nicole, we could talk all day, and I mean, you don't know me well, but I really could talk all day about this.
So can I.
And we can't. But thank you so much for participating. I'm sure people can go to Fable Security and learn more. But again, thanks so much for being a guest.
Thank you. Likewise. Great conversation. You kept it so fun for us. I'm glad that I was able to answer the trivia question. And thank you for your very thoughtful questions.
Yeah, what a great start to 2026 for my podcast. So thanks again, and we'll have another episode of the Cybersecurity Bridge podcast in 2 weeks. And big news, looks pretty good that I'll be at RSA. So let me know if you'll be around, Nicole and everybody else, and we'll meet there. Thanks again.
Absolutely. See you there.